me and Michelle both get up early. And that's when I noticed that my hand was way better than it is later in the day.
Yeah, actually, what I want to do is talk to you about it when everybody gets here. But would you mind talking about it a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Because I didn't really make up a. Sometimes we have kind of like a subject that we're going to talk about, and I wrote down a few things. Um, and when I saw you, I remembered I was going to write down the whole thing about morning because I actually have tried that with a few of the stroke survivors I work with. One with his leg, I said, try. Couldn't lift his toe up, couldn't dorsiflect at all during the daytime. And so I told him to do it before he had to get up to pee in bed while he was lying down. And sure enough, he could move that toe a little bit.
Mine seems to be temperature too. You know, when I'm outside, like in my shed, like now, when I got the heater on, my hand isn't that good. Then I turn the heater off and it gets cool. Then my hand works better. So now, believe it or not, when I do my hand therapy on video, I ice my hand for like 10 minutes before therapy because then my hand is really good.
That's interesting. I'll have to. Hi, Lauren.
Hi, Ralph.
I'll have to pay attention to that. That's backwards for me. When it's cold, I have trouble walking. I get increased tone. I'm surprised that the cold.
It's funny. Like at 3 years post stroke, it was the cold was bad for me. When I went outside, my arm raised up and my knee locked up. And
Yeah,
it was
right.
But now when it's cold out, my arm and my hand are really good. My legs still my knee, everything's real stiff.
Lauren, just so you know, I was asking David if he minded talking about. David and I have known each other, I guess about 3 years now. I saw him in another group, and I liked what he was doing, and he was kind of getting mistreated, I think. And so I invited him into Stroke Buddies, and he posts a lot of videos, and a lot of people find him really inspirational. And one thing a couple of years ago, we were talking about was he kind of discovered his hand worked better early in the morning. And I'd kind of heard a little of that kind of stuff, but in our conversation, I latched onto it. And I just told him I tried it with a stroke survivor who couldn't dorsiflect during the day, and he could move his ankle before he got out of bed. So your brain apparently resets during the night. So I was asking him if this is his first time we've had him in the group, and I was asking him if he minded talking about it. If it's going to be the four of us, it's going to be a big subject. But
yeah. Well, it's really nice to meet. Oh, did you? Oh, I was just going to say, David, it's really nice to meet you, and I have heard a lot about you from Ralph. So thanks so much for joining. And I just am kind of, Ralph and I are discussing what kind of content stroke survivors want and how we might, leverage the work and resources that we have at the company that I work for, which is called MedRhythms, to kind of like help, augment the quality of content and just like identify and work on together like the kind of content people want. So I tend to mostly just be like a fly on the wall, but if you have any questions, feel free to let me know, or I can drop you my contact information too.
David, I think I got this idea for a symposium because I think I asked you about it and you said you'd participate, but you weren't going to travel.
Yeah.
So I got this idea that some of the things that we do, like what you noticed about the morning and then our conversation back and forth and everything, I think that we're innovating things on the stroke survivor side of things. And so I have this that maybe the clinicians aren't aware of, or even if they are, maybe us as stroke survivors would benefit from an explanation as to why they work. I keep discovering things that seem to work and trying to harness them, and sometimes I do, and sometimes I get them to work, but I don't necessarily know why they work. I just found out recently. I did that 3 potatoes video, and I found out that's a whole thing with your opposite so now I can't say it. Um, the same side of your brain, ipsilateral. Anyway, um, so I have this idea to bring experienced stroke survivors and clinicians together in a brain dump, both going both ways. And Lauren David's one of the people that I think would be really beneficial to that whole conversation. By the way, David, we're talking about holding it on Zoom for starters, so there wouldn't be any travel. Because David's like me, he's always messing around. I love it. Every day I tune in and I go to
Always.
buddies and I go, always, yeah, right. And I
That's
go,
what you're talking about, that working one side of your brain.
right.
When I try to work both sides of my brain when I pet my dogs. I got 2 dogs, so I try to pet with my right hand and my left hand.
Right. And he's right side affected, Lauren. So, and here's Winnie. She's we can always count on Winnie.
Yes, I'm here.
Yep, I see her there. Welcome.
Okay.
Good morning.
Thank you.
Anyway, so that's I think that that's why I think this whole exchange thing would be valuable, Lauren, because of what he's saying is I try and work both sides. So, clinicians should ask him, why do you try and work both sides? Or say, hey, well, when you work both sides, you're doing this. Or how about you could try it this way to be more effective. I think I don't know why I felt this way for a couple of years. I just think that that some of us, Joe included, he's a bit of a maniac like the rest of us. Has probably innovated some things. A lot of the things I innovated already existed. I just didn't know it. Some of the things David may be doing, already exist, and there's an explanation for them. That would be really beneficial to us, but also I think maybe what we're just doing is discovering or innovating some things that clinicians could then take back to other stroke survivors.
Well, my OT brought to my attention that when she talks to me and I start talking, I quit doing what I was doing. Because that's 2 things I couldn't do it. So I'm really working on that.
Yeah, that's a big problem. So, okay, I noticed the same thing. So, and Joe, you probably have too. When you carry things, when you walk, your walking starts getting worse because you're concentrating on, well, especially if you go upstairs or you walk between things, because I don't like threading a needle. And when I go upstairs with things in my hands, my brain knows I don't have any hand to grab onto if something happens. So I call it running out of brain. There's a medical term for it. I'm terrible with words, but basically, if you load yourself up with too many tasks, like David was saying, when he starts talking, he stops doing what he was doing. And I don't know, this would be one of my questions to the clinicians would be, what is this, running out of brain thing? It seems to me that we're using other parts of our brain. I was told the spot on the top of the right side of my head where my stroke occurred, those brain cells are dead. They're gone. Actually, they're totally gone now because your brain actually reabsorbs the dead brain cells. But they contain some information that was kind of key to my walking and using my hands and things like that. And I was told by my neurologist that those cells would not regenerate and they were dead, they were gone, and that as a stroke survivor, I had to learn to use other parts of my brain that weren't necessarily meant for walking and hands and things to learn how to do those things again. So I think I don't know, this is conjecture. I think we're at a slight disadvantage because we've lost part of our brain and we're using other parts, and the brain is a little bit kind of scrambled for a while as to until you rebuild those signals really strongly. So that's why I think this exchange would be really a beneficial thing. David's
Makes
one of the
sense.
people who it seems to innovate. Joe?
Well, I think what you just said right there is really important about how your brain, how you're trying to use parts of your brain that's not intended to do those tasks. And you have to retrain yourself, and how hard that is to retrain yourself. But that's real important. Another thing that I like to say is, I call it recalibration. And I will go out and I'll work in the garden, I'll work on painting, remodeling my house. And I'll go so far, and then I have to stop and recalibrate my brain. One of the best ways for me there's two good ways for me to recalibrate my brain. One way is to have total silence and quiet my brain and just sit there and meditate maybe on one subject. I might think of a flower, I might think of a bird, I might think of the flower garden I'm trying to plant. And I'll try to maintain that thought for as long as I can and just meditate on that without having all this other noise going on in my brain. Another thing that I like to do to recalibrate my brain, of course, is music. If I can sit down and listen to music for a half hour, and just let the music take my brain away into a better place. A third thing I like to do is I call recalibrating my brain is when I take my dog for a walk in the morning. I try to walk the dog at least a mile to half mile every morning. And with my situation with lack of balance, walking sort of like gets my day started to where I can maintain a little bit better during the day. So these are things that I think are important to do. And I call it recalibrating. And that's taking time to rest and to regroup yourself. And I'll go as far as I can. I always say that when I try to garden, when I try to paint or plaster or anything like that, it's like torture because, here I am going to stand, I'm going to try to do these things, and it's painful to do in my brain, but I do it anyways. And I only go as far as I can, and then I stop. And then I totally relax. And a project that should take me a day will take me a week, but it gets done.
I'm the same way, sort of. A project that should take me a day takes me 2 or 3, but I just keep plodding along. And I like recalibration. I guess I first discovered this. One of the things that makes me run out of brain intensely is when I get up on ladders in the garden and start pounding in a stake, holding a level in a stake with my affected hand on a 6-pound sledgehammer with the other, and leaning out over the ladder, and I got nowhere to go if something goes wrong and I lose my balance because my hands are full. And I'll run out of brain pretty quickly. I also discovered that when I just come back down the ladder and go blah, 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 or whatever, I can kind of reset my brain in a short period of time. But when I'm working in the garden or around the house, and David's a big one for fixing up his house and working in the garden and yard, because all three of us here realize that therapy's all around you. You can turn anything you want into therapy. When I am working in the garden, or painting the house, I end up taking a break 5 minutes or so, about every hour or so. I just go, okay, that's enough, and I just go sit down, and then shortly thereafter, I usually feel like, okay, what are you sitting down for? Get back to work, get up and do it. So, yeah, and I think it does have to do with the fact that we just don't have as much brain for movement. I don't think I had any cognitive losses, and I asked my wife and some other people that are close to me, and they all said no. So there are other parts of my brain that seem to have come to the stroke intact, but the whole movement part and the whole doing multiple tasks at the same time. So,
Where's your stroke at?
hmm?
Your stroke, what part of your brain was saying?
It was right up here near the top on the right side.
Because that sounds real familiar. I got all my cognition. Everything's here, but I get fatigued. I can think as good as I could before, but the thinking makes me tired.
Right. So you were a service or parts or both manager at a Honda dealership, right?
Yeah, I was service manager for total time in the dealership was 25 years. I was service manager for 20 years.
So,
But when I go to the Ford dealer now to get my car serviced, and I spend 5 minutes in the service department, I can't imagine doing that job. The phones are ringing, the technicians are coming to bug guys, and I live that every day, and I can't even imagine it.
you think it would overload you?
Yeah, I'd be overloaded in 5 minutes.
But you have all your cognition.
Yeah, I could still tell you how to put front brake pads on a car. I could do all of it. If I had somebody with 2 hands, I could teach them how to do all of it.
Well, but the other thing is despite the fact you have all your cognition, you got some aspect of feeling overwhelmed. I don't have that so much, but I'm self-employed and I ease back into it. I shoot video, and I had some money in the bank, so during my recovery, I took jobs as they came, but didn't look for them, and I kind of eased back into it. In fact,
Right now, where the pandemic is, I think it's a great place to get a job for somebody because people don't want to work right now. And I know I could get a job, except for I'm not well enough yet to get a job.
I tried to go back to work. I used to do electrical schematics for large audio video systems for performing arts centers and lecture halls.
really?
And yeah, and I was a CAD engineer, and I'd take the plans and I'd put them all down on paper and how everything was wired. Well, I could do that, but it takes me so much longer, and I just can't do it I just can't perform under stress, and I can't perform with a deadline. I can do anything as long as I don't have a deadline, I can do it.
Yep.
And I can take my time and do it at my own pace. I mean, I worked my butt off, as you know, David. I mean, Ralph, I had a big party this weekend, my 5th year anniversary party.
And your garden reveal, right?
Pardon me?
Did you do your garden reveal?
Yeah, I had everything done but the cross, and I still have to carve. I planted a 45-foot by 45-foot yard strict survivor garden. I call it my adoration garden. It's a place to go say thank you for these last 5 years. And I'm 90% done with it. But I had all the spring flowers in it, and I had all my friends here to celebrate my 5-year anniversary. Had a great bonfire, it was a great party. But I worked my butt off. I also had just finished my guest bedroom. I put in a wainscoting bed wall and all new molding. But I worked my butt off, so Sunday I was like worthless. All I could do is just lay on the couch. That was it. I couldn't even wash a dish.
Oh, I get it. I've been feeling that. I was going at my house renovation and painting like a maniac before I took a trip, and when I came back, I really have had a lot of trouble getting back into that routine. Now, I've done a number of other things in my stroke work and mowed the lawn and everything, but I guess I kind of feel like I don't want to be under all the pressure. Before my trip, I was putting the pressure on. Now I've got a real estate agent who wants to list my house and everything. And I guess I'm kind of feeling like if I get back into working as hard as I did, I'm working myself out of the house and onto the street, and I don't know exactly where I'm going yet. And everybody I talk to says, if you don't know what you're doing, don't do anything. And that's always been my philosophy. So going to have a little conversation today about taking the pressure off as far as getting this house sold and everything, because I'm having trouble dealing with it. I don't know if it's a stroke thing or not. It seems like it might be. Before my trip, I was motivating myself. I didn't feel the pressure. I just kept pushing because I wanted to get it done. And especially towards the end, after a couple months of painting, like you said, takes you longer, takes me longer. So the whole job took a lot longer than, I'm 13 years out, but I still imagined I was going to paint this house like a 35-year-old house painter, I suppose. And that sure didn't happen.
But the thing is you did it.
I did it. Yeah.
That's the thing is, for me, doing my house and doing my yard, my yard's half a football field, and I'm making all kinds of gardens all over the place. But it's my art, it's my enjoyment, it's what and it's my accomplishment. I say after having a major stroke and laying in bed for a year thinking that was the rest of my life, here I am doing things, and it's just so enjoyable. I'm probably enjoying my life more today than I did before my stroke. That might sound weird, but
no, I hear that a lot. I monitor the groups, and I don't always comment on everything. If I got something to add, I'll comment anywhere. But I hear that a lot. That it's usually on the ones where people are complaining about their life and how they can't connect to anything new or now. They can't connect to the old things. They can't seem to find new things. I always tell them to find a hobby, find something you're passionate about, like your gardens. I'm looking at my backyard right now, and I don't have any room for any more gardens because the last 11 years I've already, well, I could over there by the fire pit, I suppose, but I've got a lot of my yard already designated to various types of gardening. David,
Ralph,
go ahead.
life is what you make it, and you make it beautiful.
Right.
That's what you're doing. You're making your life beautiful.
Right.
You're helping people. Both of you, and I follow you too, David. Both of you are out there doing the most you can with your life, and you're not wasting another moment. And that's what's fantastic. And
David, good.
And I think that's the key to recovery. Is you got to latch on to just a little tiny star and ride with it.
Right. David's big on yard work and therapies all around you. I know from his posts. I know from talking to him. I actually kind of wrote a poem about this. One day I was walking up the beach, and I'm not a writer. In fact, I was terrible in English. I married a writer, and over 30-something years, I actually became a pretty decent writer. I probably asked her 500,000 questions in that time, literally. But anyhow, I was walking up the beach, and all of a sudden, I'd never tried to write a poem before. I'd never written one before. I didn't know what was happening to me when it started happening. I was walking up the beach, and I started writing this poem in my head based on what I was seeing and feeling and experiencing right there. In fact, when I post this meeting, I'll put the poem as a comment. I haven't written one since either, and I've tried to sit down a couple of times, and that doesn't work. I don't know where this poem came from. It's about what I was seeing and what I was feeling. It ends up like you were talking about, not wasting any time trying to do something with your life. And it ends up with me saying, take your own advice, find the beauty in the world around you and the beauty in other people, and create something beautiful. and that's the end. And it was very much was reminded of that when you were talking about your backyard and your experience and just trying to do something with our lives. We were given another chance. So, people, ask me if I suppose I'm on a mission to help other stroke survivors, but I don't look at it that way. I don't feel like I was, intentionally left here to live to try and help stroke survivors. The calling came from within me. And I also, I guess I was helping other people before I had my stroke. In my life, I made about over 50 full-length videos for nonprofits, animal shelters, boys' homes, rescue missions, stroke, whatever. So thank you, Mom. I've always kind of tried to help people, and it just slipped into it. And I can slip out of it too. So I don't feel it like a calling, except that I feel like I can do some good, and therefore I get up every day and try and do some good.
My project today is when I was laying in bed, unable to move, I missed so many things in life. And actually, I wasn't laying in bed. Actually, I was sitting in a wheelchair in a courtyard, and there's just a brick courtyard, nothing there to do. And there's one single plant that I said, I miss gardening. And I said, it'd be neat to make a garden, a raised bed garden high enough to where you could work it from a wheelchair. And then a year and a half later, I went to Saddleback Church, and they had these gardens to feed the homeless, and they were raised bed gardens that were high enough, but that wasn't their intention. So today, my project is I'm making a raised bed garden high enough and accessible from a wheelchair. And the thing that I'd really like to do, and I'm sitting with the city, and I'm trying to make a community garden of raised bed gardens that people in a wheelchair can do. Now, I just happened to think of how I was going to build this, and I had this epiphany or this idea so I've got a canoe, 17-foot canoe. So I'm raising it up to 36 inches high, and I'm going to fill it with dirt and some drainage tiles and an irrigation system, and that'll be my garden, because I can't look down. When I look down, I lose it. So I have this raised bed garden made out of canoe. But the whole idea about that is to sit with the city, and there's an area in the city that I'd like to make these raised bed gardens. And so get right along the lake or the river, and I said it'd be cool to make it out of different rowboats and canoes and things like that. So it looks cool.
Well, the other thing about I've seen the picture of the canoe upside down along the in the north you'd call it an anchor fence, chain link fence.
Yep.
And as you were describing that, I'm thinking that's perfect, because the one thing about a wheelchair is you don't have, even if it slides under, you have limited reach.
Mm-hmm.
So a canoe or boats would be good, because if they were accessible from both sides, you could certainly with a canoe, you could reach to the middle from both sides.
Well, I don't have the money right now, but I want to put a dock on both sides.
A dock on both sides in your backyard, or like
in my backyard, there'll be a dock on both sides of the canoe. The canoe will be raised, so someone could go out there, and the dock will be, right on the ground, or half inch above the ground. So someone could actually wheel their canoe out there, or wheel their wheelchair out there on the dock, and reach in and do the gardening.
Cool.
And then the idea is to put it on Pinterest and hopefully the city will adopt it. And then I'd love to see these raised bed gardens. I'd like to see them almost, I'd like to have them commonplace in nursing homes, where the people in nursing homes, what do? They put them in a chair. I was in a nursing home that looked like a prison, and they'd put me in a wheelchair and wheel me out to the hall, and I'd just sit in the hall and watch people move around. And I thought this would be cool to put people in a wheelchair, wheel them out to a garden. They could pick a couple weeds. They could pick a cucumber or tomato, and maybe have a garden and experience life again. You know, maybe they go out there and plant the canoe, plant the cucumber, the tomato, and watch it grow, and they can eat the fruits, and that's what life is all about.
I think two really, really important things in people's lives. I have a friend that I work with for stroke survivor friend I worked with for 5 years, and she was in two different assisted living facilities, and she was in her early 50s, and everybody else was in their late 70s. So she didn't fit in like you probably didn't fit in because the population was a lot older. And there's nothing to do. Everybody's sitting around the hall, you know, they're falling asleep in their wheelchairs. It's sad. I mean, I went there 500 times in 5 years, more than that, 750 times. And it's sad. And two things that I think really could change that. One, I saw there was a woman who'd bring her service dog in, and it was a true service dog. It wasn't one of these ones with a $30 vest that, you know, people sneak on airplanes and such. It was a trained service dog, a lab, and it was just so good with everybody. And the residents just look forward to that to no end. And gardening, I think, is the same way. It, when you sit in the hall in a wheelchair, you're disconnected from the world. And, you know, a dog or a flower or the putting your hands in the dirt, I mean, that's ground. I mean, they call it grounding, you know, and you're not getting a whole lot of grounding in a nursing home or assisted living center. I can tell you that.
Every assisted living center should have a tablet or an iPad with music on it and headphones, so these people can A, listen to music or stream music somehow, and then B, so they can connect with their family and friends through Facebook. And there should be an instructor there to help assist these people with their Facebook time, with their FaceTime, so they can be connected with the outside world.
My experience is that their attitude's a lot like an insurance company. They do things that look good in the brochure to attract people to come, and beyond that, they really don't. I'm going to say this. They really don't seem, in my opinion, to care about the residents in the way that they should. It's too much of a business. And I've been through this at Kelly's two places with both sets of management, trying to get her new wheelchairs and, you know, and things. And, you know, they're really interested in the status quo, unfortunately.
They warehouse you. I was sitting in a chair one time, and behind me, I was sitting there talking to another lady, an elderly lady, and she was also in her wheelchair. And behind me, they pushed a gurney with a body bag on it. And I looked behind over my shoulder. I said, "Oh man, that's sad," because I knew the guy that passed. And this older lady said, "Honey, that's the only way you're ever going to leave here. You're just being warehoused until you die." And that's when I made my mind up that I was not going to be that person, and that I was going to walk out the front doors. And thank God I was able to, because a lot of people just aren't able to. But most
I bet there
nursing
was
homes,
some effort involved in that. I bet it didn't just happen, because I walked out of the front door of the rehab hospital I was in at 22 days post-stroke, and I worked hard to do it, and I was terrified because I had never walked on my own up until about 4 o'clock the day before I was to walk out. And the hospital was not real excited about me walking out because they considered it a liability, and they said that so they kept like trying to put up roadblocks. Like they said, well, your physical therapist will have to be with you. And I said, perfect, because she's the reason I'm going to walk out of this place. And they went, oh, okay, what else can we come up with? Anyhow, the day before I was to walk out, I was getting really nervous, and I was walking with my PT, Kathy, and I was, I usually talk to her. I was pretty aware. She did stay on my left affected side, and I did have some minor left side neglect, so which would be another good topic of for a meeting. So I'm just writing them down because this morning I went to write down topics and I went, God, I had 30 of them and I can't remember but about 3. Anyway, so, I generally paid attention to her, but suddenly I noticed that she didn't seem to be there. And so I stopped and turned around and she had let go about 15 feet back. And she realized, well, she didn't want me to panic or anything. So she said, I'm right here. Don't worry. Just keep on going to your wheelchair. So it's like your mom or dad with a bicycle, when you're pedaling down your street when you're 5 years old and all of a sudden you realize they've let go. Oh my God, I'm doing it on my own. Which is like a thrilling and terrifying feeling at the same time. Lauren, I saw you shaking your head. So if you understand that, then you kind of can understand this whole thing about exhilaration and terror at the same time that we experience sometimes in taking on these things, like Joe with his gardening, me with the painting my house. The other day I went to change a light bulb and I stood on a milk crate. It's like less than a foot off the ground. I couldn't look up. I couldn't put my hands up. My brain would not let me do it. I got back on the ground. I looked up, put my hands up, got back up on trying to pattern, got back up on the milk crate. Nope. Brain
Well, I
said
could
no.
never do it on a milk crate. Now I could do it on a ladder if I have handles. I'm on a ladder quite a bit.
Well, yeah, a ladder. What I did was, when painting my house, I bought a bigger ladder because I realized I didn't like being up too high. I like to be able to lean into those top couple of steps. So I had a 6-foot ladder. I went ahead and got a 10-foot ladder, so I could, get up higher and still have something. And actually, I took the 6-foot ladder. I have a picture of it. I posted it. And I took like a pole saw, not a pole saw, but a trimmer, one of those things that you can cut branches 15 feet off the ground with. It extends like a fiberglass pole. I strapped it to the one side of the ladder, the left side, so I could hold onto it while I painted and be up too high. But I didn't like it, so I bought another ladder. So one thing that all of us seem to do, or maybe not all of us, but some of us, I know Joe, you do, and I know David does, and I know I do, and that's this concept of paying it forward. It's an interesting subject of conversation. So, we were all given a second chance. We're all still here. We don't necessarily know what that means or whatever, but there are a lot of people who have strokes that seem to want to help other survivors or, pay it forward, as I say. I always tell people ask me why I do this, and I say, I'm trying to be the person that I wish I could have talked to after my stroke. It's that simple. Because
That was the reason for my post with all the pictures of the party,
right,
the garden.
right,
That wasn't so much, for myself or, gratification for myself, but I know that there was a day when I was sitting in a bed with my tablet looking at Facebook, and I saw Michael Brandy walking across the United States. And that was such a big motivation to say, someone made it. And that was the reason why I posted that, is because, hey, when you're sitting there all alone in a nursing home, in a bed, and your world consists of whatever you can reach, that's all the more that's what your world is. It's good to see a positive image of somebody doing things and having a good time. The rewards of all that physical therapy that you go through.
I used to not post or feel funny when I posted stuff that I could do that other people couldn't do, because I thought it was bragging, or I thought that would make people feel bad.
Exactly.
I had a number of stroke survivors say, no, it does just the opposite. It seeing that positive image gives me hope. I think some of them know they may never be able to do it, but you have to have hope for the future, or you don't have much in life, do you? If you don't want to get out of bed in the morning because you don't.
Hope and a positive mental attitude are the best medicines you have.
Yeah, along with puppies and plants.
Ralph, this Bill Allen from London. Please just say hello to you.
Yeah. Hey,
I
Bill.
was wondering if you could tell us how bad your arm was and the what you did to recover. What worked for you?
I could do that. How bad was my arm?
And your
Uh,
fingers and wrist.
well, after my stroke, I could not move my fingers at all. None whatsoever. My hand was not all balled up in a claw or anything. It was half way. It wasn't I couldn't
That's
extend.
tremendous what you're doing there now.
Well, I mean, that's my affected hand. I can go both ways. Let's see, that's that way, then that's that way.
Brilliant.
I practiced that for 2 months, and I used oppositional therapy to get back there. I'm a really big believer in patterning. This opposite, same side of the brain, ipsilateral, the using. I did my demo the other day in Michelle Jensen's group, and I got 8 good ones. I've never gotten more than 3 or 4. I got 8, and they recorded it. And it's where you just for you, if I can't do something very well like that, oh, that's good and jerky. Watch what happens if you do both.
So to begin with, you just tried to.
And watch what happens after I drop the other one. 1, 2, 3, 4. So they're smoother. They're not perfect. So I'm a big believer in the opposite side and patterning. I think there's a number of ways that we pattern our brains. I want to study more. I am in my own little way and talking to people and whatever. But I think that there's if we can understand how the brain works in terms of patterning and how that plays into neuroplasticity, then couldn't we learn how to be better at using neuroplasticity in our own recoveries through program patterning? And guess what? I see Laura nodding her head, and that's because I happen to have watched all 30 MedRhythms short videos over the weekend. And I'm here to tell you that I'm embarrassed, number one, that I hadn't done that before with all my trip and house painting and everything, that I never took the time. And I'm admitting it right here on television. But there's some patterning going on there with the music thing, because people can do it after you turn the music off. That was the biggest revelation that I got. You guys have a funny word for it. I haven't memorized it yet. I mean, it's not funny. It's just not what you would think of for the lasting effect. It's not lasting effect.
Is it carryover?
Carryover. There you go. I mean, once you hear it, it makes perfect sense. But it wouldn't necessarily be the term that I came up with, the residual or whatever. Yeah, so there's a carryover effect on what MedRhythms is doing with music. When I saw that, I recently found out that their CEO is a clinician and not just a CEO. That got my attention big time, because, and then when I watched the very first video, I said, that looks like a young Brian playing the guitar. And if it is, then, I mean, he's been involved in this on a rubber meets the road level, and I confirmed with Lauren that it actually was. So I have a tremendous new respect for MedRhythms and Brian, because of the fact that they're really, I feel like knowing those things made me feel like the company and Brian are very grounded in reality. I saw some of the things that they were doing with aphasia. I could see some of the stuff that was working, and I think that music holds a lot of possibility. And I think that It also made me excited about the possibility of generating content together and that kind of thing because, well, if you're going to have a partner, you want to have a good partner, don't you? So that was my experience for the weekend. And I have 5 long form videos. They're about 45 minutes each that I'm going to watch with I guess they're mostly they're 4 or 5 doctors. So they're some type of neuroscientists, neurologists, clinicians, doctors of physical therapy. I haven't watched them all yet. But I'm going to because I think you're onto something there, Lauren. But then I guess you would feel that way since you and other employees are working hard towards whatever the dream and mission are.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, and I should also say the videos that Ralph's referencing, those can all be found on YouTube too. So if if you are interested in watching any of them, feel free to let Ralph or myself know. I'll drop my contact info in the chat again, and it's on the Facebook group, but we can always send those over to you if you're curious.
one of the things I'm going to start doing, and I'm trying to refine these things, but I also have a life and only have so much time. So this week I didn't get to prepare anything. Like I've got this idea that we should be doing something on stroke for women because it's different, but that's going to require background research. I got asked to be a guest on somebody else's show and talk about spasticity. Well, I'm not an expert on spasticity except my own. And by the way, Bill, I'll get back to the hand and shoulder in just a sec. I haven't forgotten you. And I answered it more on terms of patterning than I did specifics to the hand and shoulder, arm and shoulder. So one of the things I want to do is after the fact, when we post them, post some of the things that we talked about. Like if I talked about the oh gosh, I wish I was better with words. The same side thing, and I talked about the 3 potatoes video, then I would post the 3 potatoes video. So one of the things I thought about, Lauren, was I intended to talk a little bit about med rhythms because I had an experience over the weekend watching that stuff. And I could tell anybody if they went to their website to look for the ones that start with somebody's first name, like Ty or Bill or whatever, because they're all stories about individuals. So if you want to do it before this comes out, just look for the names of the patients. And they're all short. I think the longest one's about 3.5 minutes. Took me a while because I was also making notes. Well, wait a minute, that makes me think about this. And that gives me a question about this. Because, see, I've kind of told Lauren that if I interviewed clinicians or whoever that as a stroke survivor, I would do it in different ways. And now she's kind of taken me up on that idea. And guess what, guys? I got to deliver now. I got to come up with some questions that are different and innovative that, somebody else wouldn't ask. And I don't think I'll have any trouble doing that. But so I ended up, Lauren, watching some of the videos a couple of times. And I would see the carryover. Is that the word you're using? Yep. And I'd go and look a second time when they weren't playing the music and see if I could see any differences and stuff. I was, basically tearing it apart like I do anything I look at, not trying to find anything wrong, trying to understand. I look at, as a video shooter and editor and an intense person and a visual person, I think I look at things differently than a lot of people. But anyway, so Bill, to get back to what we were talking about, I'll try and be brief with this. While I was in the rehab hospital, they told me to look at my hand and think about moving it. And I have a video about this. It's called Hand 101 on my YouTube channel. And I make a joke about, I thought it was about the stupidest thing I'd ever heard. Not stupid, but I mean, I just, okay, I'm going to stare at my hand and think about moving it and it's going to move. Okay, sure, right. And I say in the video, well, it beat my plan because I didn't have a plan at all. So I went with it. And while I was there, I got like a 16th of an inch of movement, like just the littlest bump, just nothing. And, it was movement. So I told them, and they all got excited. And I had a occupational therapist, a physical therapist, and I went to physical therapy twice a day, occupational therapy once a day, and I also had a arm and hand class that was mostly occupational therapy, I would say. So that's where it came from, and I showed them in the hand and arm class, and they got all excited, and I went, okay, this is part two of what I don't understand. The first thing I didn't think it would work, and now they're all excited. Well, what I found out was that once you get movement, you can build on it. And I was talking with a stroke survivor the night before last. I have a lot of conversations in Messenger. I got 10 of them going on at any given time. Not every day, but at any given time. And this person got the first movement in their fingers in 3 years, and she was all excited. And I said, well, you should be excited, and you can build on it. So I don't know where you're at, Bill, but if you have any movement at all, you can build on it.
So just stare at it and talk to it and tell it to move.
Yep.
But this is great because I think you're in your 50s when you're doing it. I'm in my 50s, so
I was 58 when I had my stroke. I'm 71 now.
you got it back. That's well done, really well done.
I also went at it very intensely. I mean, like most people could not or would not do what I did. When I got home from the rehab hospital, I did a few things. I realized that I needed to work a lot at home, that before I even went to physical therapy, just from my experience in the rehab hospital, I said, I'm going to need more than, once or twice a week for an hour. So I needed to develop a home program. I was training for the senior games and had my stroke on my exercise bicycle. So I knew about training, and I just said, okay, you got your new training program. It's, my stroke recovery became my training program, and I know how to stick to a training program. I know how to set one up. So I was at an advantage there, and that's one of the things that, like, through Stroke Buddies, these meetings, and something we're doing called Roadmap, we try and get people aware of the fact that you really have to take ownership of your own recovery and do it at home. And do you have something to say, Joe?
Yeah, I want to add two more things for Bill to understand.
Sure.
Hopefully it helps him. I have two sayings. Number one, therapy is like piano lessons. Okay, to get good at playing the piano, you got to practice on your own. So when you have your therapy sessions, that's one thing. But what are you going to do after the therapist leaves? What's your exercise plan? And number two, I always say work works. This comes from my high school cross country coach, and he says just that simple. Work works. So yes, it takes a lot of work to do it. And when the therapist leaves, all she did is gives you a hint on what you need to work on for the rest of the week or the next 4 or 5 days.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in establishing rapport with your physical therapist and getting homework. And the first one there is how do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, practice, practice. And the other one, I say it differently, but it's the same thing. Success builds on success.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so work works. It's the same thing. I took it, and I'm not discounting that you haven't done this, Joe. I took it one step further, and I decided that the way to be successful was to set really small goals almost every day. And when you achieve your goals, you feel good about yourself.
A life without goals has very little meaning.
Right. And so success builds on success. And, I mean, I was a maniac, but I was also smart enough to know, I see people that like every day or every time I won't mention any names, that add more and more and more to their routine. Okay, if I was working on doing, you know, push-ups, and I could do 3 push-ups, and the next day I did 4 push-ups, what was my goal for the next day? It was not 5 push-ups because it took me a month to get from 3 to 4. My goal was to see if I could do 4 again, and my sub goal was if I could only do 3 or I failed halfway through the 4th one, don't beat up on yourself. There's always tomorrow. You know, maybe you'll hit 4 tomorrow. Just keep at it. Don't get discouraged. And both of those things, not getting discouraged and setting small goals, and success builds on success. They're a lot like, you know, when you run, they say, you know, don't look at the top of the hill, it'll discourage you. Some people say, I look at the top of the hill to get encouraged. Maybe this is a bad analogy, but you have to stay focused on what you're doing and set realistic goals. And a realistic goal can be to be repeated, just simply repeat what you did for the first time yesterday. Okay, so Bill, by the time I got out of the rehab hospital at 22 days, I had really slight quarter-inch, half-inch movement in my fingers. That's about it. I'm doing it now with my affected hand. My hand was glued to my lap. Glued. I could not raise my hand up off my thigh no matter what I did, no matter how hard I thought, no matter how hard I strained. And every once in a while, I would yawn, and my arm would go all the way up, and I'd look at it and go, how come I can't do that? And it would come down, and then it would be stuck in my lap again, and no matter how hard I tried, that's a reflex, and I've not found anybody who ever harnessed it, except one person who claimed to, but then they couldn't explain it to me. I'm not saying he didn't, but they couldn't explain how they had managed to harness it. So I'm always looking for things that work and trying to figure out how to integrate them back into therapy and make them work for you.
I think I saw somewhere where you say you were doing 8 to 10 hours a day of just working on it. Would that be right? That sort of time input?
Yeah, 10 to 12 would be more like it. I got up at 7 and I worked till 7, and then after a few months I'd even have a glass of wine at 7, and I'd sit on the back deck and I'd get out my hammer and do it. So that did
Just
not...
willing your arm to, just willing your fingers to move.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Also, my hand and arm recovery was backwards in that my hand, I couldn't get it out of my lap, but I could move it a little bit. My hand came back first, my wrist and second, my elbow and arms, being able to straighten them was third, and my shoulder was last. I could walk pretty well at 6 months. My shoulder took over a year, you know, to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And make a gun. Full extension on your hand is making a gun. Yeah, I got some shakes still. Guess what? Want to see me stop it?
Mm-hmm.
There you go. Stopped. Now I can move it. I might get it back. Nope, I'm maintaining it. Anyway, now that takes a lot of brain. I got this idea for like a VU meter. It's like a brainometer. I'm going to have my cameraman follow me around, and then I'm going to put what's going on in my brain on the brainometer. The other day I was finishing washing the dishes and I was putting them away, and I got real heavy stoneware plates, and I grabbed 2 of them. And I went to stick them out in front of me, and I got real bad shakes, so I stopped it. I can stop it. But the brainometer was like pegged in the red the whole time I was doing that. And in fact, I know from experience that when I do that, it continues after I set the plates down or after I stop. So I actually put the plates away and then put my hands on the counter, and I had a pan in the other hand, and I went to put it away, and I kept my hand on the counter because I always feel like woozy. I've never fallen over, never passed out, but I'm always careful about it. Anyway, So I started, getting some finger movement back. And so I started doing the second one is thumb push-ups. And because that's a fairly simple motion. On the other hand, some people, I have a friend who, when he puts his thumb up, his fingers come in. When he pulls his fingers out, his thumb comes down. There's some interrelationship there that I only know what I did, and it's based on the severity of my stroke. And I realized that people out there have had strokes that were less than mine, and there are a lot of people out there that have definitely had strokes that were a greater challenge than mine. I feel philosophically it's really a bad idea to compare, and but that's a reality. So. I started, then I started doing opposition. Oops, wrong way. I have a new respect for dentists after I've started Zooming, because everything you do in Zoom is backwards. And the dentists are there, they're drilling, they're like doing really fine work inside a mirror inside your mouth. I don't know how they do it. I tried to put a necklace on in the mirror the other day. Oh, no, anyway. So I started doing opposition and some simple things. So yeah, I did 10 or 12 hours a day. It didn't include, well, I guess I included when I went to outpatient physical therapy and occupational therapy. I also occasionally had shoots, video shoots, but when I went and stood behind a camera for the first time for 8 hours, when I could hardly stand up, I put a chair behind me and I just did what I could do. I think showing up and trying is a lot of it. But even when I was in the car, I had rubber bands, a hammer, putty, and you could always do opposition and things in the car. So I was doing it all the time. One time I went shopping because I didn't want to be left at home, and I went to sit in the car. I was going to sit in the car, and I said, well, that's silly. I could go in and get a shopping cart and walk around. So I did, and I discovered shopping carts are the absolute best walkers in the world. Since then, I work with stroke survivors live in person where I live, and I've taken 3 people shopping with me. I just pick them up while I'm going grocery shopping, get them hooked up on a cart and say, all right, let's walk around for half an hour till I'm done. Or like in Home Depot, I'll take them and say, I'm going to the paint department next, so head over to the paint department. And then when they get to the paint department, I'm done, and I say, I'm going over to hardware. It's 4 aisles up, and I leave them in. Actually, I did that with my brother-in-law on that very first trip when I got the shopping cart. So I've actually taken people to shopping. So I was a bit of a maniac, and I also did not have, I had fatigue. I didn't have fatigue like some people describe fatigue in their posts on Facebook. I never took a nap, ever. When I got tired, I lay on my bed in like a sarcophagus, like King Tut, and rested my brain. I did about 50 minutes on and 10 minutes off, or 55 on and 5 minutes off. I read somewhere that you continue to make connections after you stop. So I would go at it and I would lay on the bed. And I told my wife, if I ever fell asleep, wake me up. I never fell asleep though. And so I just started, working my fingers more and more and more. And they got better, but I couldn't even, I could hardly get them up here for several months. And then, like, I got really stuck. I started doing abducting, abducting, and I did circles. I have videos on these on my YouTube channel. Shoot me a message and remind me to send them to you, and I'll send you them. Or else in Stroke Buddies yesterday, I posted every single link I have in my YouTube channel, and they're all organized by arm and shoulder, hand, walking better, motivational. So there's a block you could look for, 2 blocks you could look for there. That's hand, 101 to 112. I don't know why I made them like college courses, but I did. And then arm and shoulder. Circles are really good for your arm and shoulder because you basically draw a circle with your index finger, and it will look like a triangle when you start, at best. It'll be jerky. So, people would say, well, how many of them did you do? I said, well, right away I couldn't do that many, but I built up to do 100 and do 100 in each direction. And they go, well, I can do that. And I said, well, yeah, but I did it 10 times a day. I did 2,000. And they shoot me this look like, you're not kidding, are you? And I'd shoot them back a look like, no, I'm not kidding. Anyway, so I did things that most people aren't willing to do, and people with fatigue perhaps could not do. When I got fatigued, I would just push myself through it. Video shoots were one thing. I showed up for everything I had booked. I did not look for work for a better part of a year. But everything that I had promised, I showed up and delivered. So standing behind the camera for 8 hours the first time was with Zonta on a thing on human trafficking that I felt was really important to get on video, and I'd promised it to him, so I showed up. Yeah, I sat down in the chair about 2 or 3 times in the 8 hours for about 5 minutes till I felt stupid again and said, get up and do it, Ralph. I had another one where we shoot old folks at the folk festival, people who had grown up on a farm before electricity. I shot about 110 of them. Right after my stroke, that's in August, and in the mountains it's normally cool. That day it was 96 degrees, and it was killing me. The heat was killing me. And I hid in the shade some, and they said, well, you go home. I said, then we will stop recording, and I won't do that. So I just pushed through it. I don't know that that's a good idea. I don't recommend that to other people, because I don't know if there are any physical or neurological implications to what I did, and I'm trying to help people. So if I'm wary about anything, I might say, this is what I did, but I don't recommend it or whatever. So, Bill, what other
Well, that's very helpful. I mean, it's just trying to get my first movement going. I've
how
already had
far
no
out are you?
movement. Had no movement for 5 years now in my hand, my fingers.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I
Okay.
could move the.
Do you try integrating it into your life? Like, do you try holding a zucchini and cutting it with your non-affected hand? Or do you try to open the refrigerator door with it? Or do you have enough use to open the refrigerator door?
Just really a door handle. But I used to buy an SH200. I don't know if you've come across that.
Well, I have a friend who got her hand back at 5 years. I'm going to say this to try and encourage you, and this is a true story. Barbara Millen Patrick, she's a member of Stroke Buddies. I can't believe I've gotten good with names in my old age. I used to be terrible with names, and now all of a sudden I remember everybody's name. Anyway, Barbara is a stroke survivor in Charleston. I've met her. I actually I go to the stroke groups there, not because I need it, but well, sometimes the topics are interesting and the socialization is good. And anyway, I actually went to one to meet her, and she got her hand back at 5 years. She thought there was no hope. And what she did was, at that point, I don't think she'd done it previously. I could be wrong. But she started involving her hand in housework. And she also did something in the pool, maybe with her arm, because your hand doesn't weigh as much. She had a backyard pool. But mainly, she did housework, and in a year or so, she had a lot of her hand back. And I've seen her hand move, and she's well, I wouldn't have a competition with her because I don't believe in them, but she's up there with me. I mean, she's got a pretty full functional hand, and it was from involvement. Therapy's all around you. Try and do something like that's appropriate to your current skill level. And if you email me, I'll be glad to, or message me on Facebook Messenger. I'll be glad to get involved with you on a personal level and
Oh,
talk
thank
about
you.
things that are specific to you, make recommendations, tell you my experience, that kind of thing.
That'd be very kind of you. Thank you.
It's what I do. And I'd be happy to do it. You know, we'll both be pretty thrilled if you get some more movement out of that sucker. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, we will. Me too.
I'll message you later.
Okay. I tell people this a lot, and I don't think they think I'm serious. I don't know why, but I don't have anything in Messenger where my message isn't the last one, unless somebody says good night and I don't reply to it. In other words, you send me a message, I'm going to message you back.
I've got your email somewhere, I think.
Well, you got if you want to, you can do it through email or Facebook Messenger, or I give you my phone number. You can do it through text. I got people that do all three in the same day. I don't quite understand why, but I can deal with juggling. So, well, we managed to talk for a long time today. I mentioned the women's meeting, and I mentioned doing some talking about the fact that your brain resets with David in the morning, because our conversation was how I kind of discovered that and started using it with some of the people I work with. But now we have some and hydration. That was another one. Hydration in general and hydration and spasticity. So now I've got some more meeting topics. And Lauren, I'd love to have one. We've talked about bringing in experts. I have 2 local occupational therapists that I could ask. I'm a little hesitant too, because I'd really like to see more than 5 or 6 people here. And, you know, because one of them works at the hospital system and he'd be giving up his time. He'd do it when he couldn't get paid, but he's kind of busy. So, you know, if I ask him, it's kind of I won't get him again for 6 months. You know, I'm pulling in a favor. So, but I also, after my experience this weekend, thought that it might be good to do something on music and maybe get somebody, not necessarily Brian, but somebody from Med Rhythms. You would know better who than I, and just talk a little bit about how music works in the brain, because I'm reading that no pill can open up pathways to the brain like music does, and there's basically nothing else that is as effective. And you know, so that fact, and how to turn that into therapy. How's Med Rhythms turning that into therapy? And more importantly, and this is what the people here want to know, is how do I turn that into therapy? Obviously, one of the answers is when the app comes out, and but that's not happening yet. So I thought about one of the experts we might get would be from Med Rhythms. I guess I feel like, you know, there are stroke survivor chit chat programs, and I don't think that's what most people want. I think most people want to know how to get better. And so that's how I'm operating in holding these meetings. I'm trying to generate some content, some good content. Actually, this discussion today was very interesting. It sometimes when you don't set a subject and have rigid ideas about what you should be talking about, stuff happens, and it did today. So,
well, I will say, if you mentioned the Med Rhythms app, you know, holds a lot of promise, but it's not actually on the market yet. As you know, we've chatted with you about, there are some opportunities for people now to try it in their home. not in kind of like the full-fledged, therapeutic capacity because it's still going through the FDA, but to give some usability and user experience feedback. So that's also something I can, share some more information about, since people are now able to see if they're eligible to try it out. Like I said, just in more of an informal capacity and for giving some feedback, but it would allow people to kind of like give this a try and, at least see what it's about if they're eligible.
Right, and there is one thing I want to pursue is looking back to see if there are more on the hand and arm. There's I saw videos on walking and I saw videos on language and aphasia, which would make sense with the music and singing and everything. And there was one, I think, on the hand and arm, because that would be interesting, because it's not the same as walking, which is very rhythmical, or aphasia, which depends on language. So the music and the lyrics, can play into that. For those of you who don't know, Laura invited me to kind of try out, test, whatever, the app, which I'm excited about for a couple reasons, because I want to know more about it. I also enjoy testing stuff. I also enjoy trying to break stuff. I told her that.
And like the app that we're developing,
but we won't tell anybody.
Well, the whole point would be, for whoever gets involved in what we're calling this prelude study or usability study. It's basically like a beta testing experience for people to get to interact with this. I said it like on a less formal level. It's still like a formal study. It's just like ultimately our device will have it'll have a prescription written for it. And this is, if you meet the criteria, we are able to send this device out for people to try in their homes. So that's one opportunity. And the device is solely focused on using music to help people with walking. But there's also, like our music therapists, you mentioned the upper extremity movement recovery work that they do, and some of the speech and language work. That's not something that we've focused on yet on the digital side, with like trying to develop an app that uses sensor technology and software. But our therapists are doing teletherapy services where they're, getting onto Zoom, video conferences with patients, and they're doing work that's not just limited to walking recovery. So that's also, if there's any silver lining through this pandemic, there's been more teletherapy available to people. And that's something that our therapists, they started doing a year ago, now that we've been in this pandemic for so long. But that's allowed them to work with people, not just in their geography, which is predominantly in the New England area, and actually work with people across the country and in different countries too. So, that's, I guess, something else too, that if anybody's interested in, I would be very happy to talk with them more about that and give them some information about how to get in touch with people who are doing teletherapy like you're referencing.
Maybe what you could do would be post that when I post this, the video of this meeting. What I want to do is kind of like have a bunch of comments from you and me, like the poem or the three potatoes video, or how you get involved in the things that we talked about. Have some links and some follow-up information.
Yeah.
Because that's more along the lines of, trying to generate lasting content rather than have a chit-chat show.
Right. And it's hard to it's not always easy to listen to these conversations and then find all of this content that we're referencing. So I think it makes a lot of sense to have some follow-up comments where you're dropping some of the videos that you're talking about into the comments, and I can drop contact info about the usability study for the device, and also info about teletherapy, so that it's all easily accessible to people. I'd be happy to do that.
Well, and this is back a minute, but basically you had to pick one app, and you're developing a walking app, but you're going to have 3 apps or more, and to try and, as a startup, to try and generate 3 apps at the same time, awful ambitious. Stretch your people kind of thin too. So I think you did what you had to do. Walking is a big one. It's probably the biggest target. I think aphasia holds the next amount of promise, though. That'd just be my opinion, having watched those videos. So, it's kind of exciting what we could see happen.
Yeah.
So, anyway, I guess we should wrap this up. Never
Yeah,
seen.
thank you.
Good.
Very useful. Thank you very much.